Hey, Bio Team. Early planet Earth was a lot different from the planet of today. It didn't start out with living things on it. The environment was too harsh. There wasn't any oxygen in the atmosphere. Instead, the atmosphere was a primordial soup, an ancient soup. It had things like methane and ammonia and carbon dioxide, which, when coupled with phosphate in the soil, were all the elements that would be necessary for life. Now, fortunately, with added heat and energy from volcanoes and lightning, organic molecules like amino acids were able to form. Now, some of these that formed had a special ability. They had polar parts to them, slightly positive and slightly negative charges, that were able to attract other molecules in such a way that they created a copy of themselves. And the copies were able to attract more copies. And so we call these types of molecules replicator molecules. Nowadays, our cells have DNA that are able to replicate itself, but we think that the earliest version of these replicator molecules was most likely RNA. Now, the thing with replicators is that they weren't perfect. They made mistakes or mutations. And while most of these mutations resulted in lower functioning replicators, replicators that were worse at making copies, some mistakes resulted in better replicators. For instance, some of these mutated replicators gained the ability to make phospholipid membranes for themselves. And these became the early versions of cells. And some of these early versions of cells learned to work together. For example, some of these cells developed mutations for these proteins on their membranes here called quorum sensing proteins that let them feel when other cells were nearby, and so they would know to stop dividing. So we'll watch that happen here. This cell divides and divides until it reaches another cell, at which point these quorum sensing proteins kick in and cell division stops. So these cells know when other cells are nearby, and they work together in that sense. And there's experimental evidence for this too. The Miller-Urey experiment basically ran a simulation of early Earth's atmosphere. They took all of the gases from early Earth's atmosphere, like water, methane, ammonia, etc., and they basically applied heat and electricity to it, and they were able to create organic molecules. But a key takeaway from all of this is that none of these early organisms or these early molecules wanted anything. They didn't want to survive. Some things were just better at reproducing, and so they became more common. And so we gradually had this shift from organic molecules to replicator molecules, to these single-celled sorts of organisms, to multi-celled organisms, to the kingdoms and life that you see on our planet today. The things that we're just better at reproducing did. And that's it. At this point, you guys have some practice problems. We'll see you next class.